Hello, I'm Rebecca the Maths Lady, and welcome to this video about teaching symmetry, which is one of my favourite topics. In this video, I'm going to talk you all the way through how we teach symmetry throughout primary school. We'll cover practical crafts and folding techniques and tracing paper and working on coordinate grids and constructing symmetry. But I won't be covering rotational symmetry. If you'd like a video on rotational symmetry, please leave me a message, and if people do, then I will make one. There are no other topics you need to have covered before this one, which is one of the reasons it's such fun, because all children can enjoy it together, no matter what their previous experiences of maths. Okay, let's get started. First of all, in their early education, children should have made pictures with symmetry, big ones like this, with squirty paint and folding paper and pressing it all down and squidging it around and seeing what happens. That is a wonderful thing to do, and it's a great idea to do it again with the children when they're a bit older. They enjoy it so much, and enjoyment breeds success in maths. So all you need is an old roll of wallpaper or some lining wallpaper, some squeezy and squidgy paints, and plenty of space, and off you go. Here's another amazing bug my children created for me. And of course, as they get older, you can fold in other directions too and explore what happens when you have more than one line of symmetry. And here's an example of that. It's lovely to comment on the extent to which the symmetry is perfect and the ways in which it isn't perfect. Maths is far too often a subject where everything is assumed to be perfect, and it's nice to connect our classroom mathematics to the real world. Just some practical tips. If you're doing that kind of activity with a whole class of children, it's nice to do it at the end of the day so they can leave those pictures out on their desks to dry, because you need a lot of space. Or if you're organised or lucky, you can borrow a picture drying trolley from a class of younger children where they often have them. Right, the next kind of activities that it's great to do are cutting activities. It's a lovely holiday activity. It's often done at Christmas, where children can try and make lovely Christmas shapes for decorations by folding paper and cutting symmetrical pictures. Here's a snowman I made earlier, and here it's quite nice to concentrate on the idea that if you want a smooth line at the top here, rather than a cone head or a pointy head or an indented head, you have to make that cut perpendicular to the fold. That's a great bit of language to use to precisely analyse what's going on there when cutting goes wrong. Children need lots of time to explore and experiment with their cutting. And as they get older, they can try cutting shapes with more than one line of symmetry. So you could just do rectangles and fold them twice. It's quite nice to have a go at snowflakes. So we just make a fold like that to create a square. And then we fold this extra bit in so that we can cut it off. Just going to cut there. So now we have a square, we can fold it here and here and here. So if we just open that up, when we cut this, our snowflake will have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines of symmetry. A real snowflake would have 6, and it's worth discussing that, but this is fun, so who cares? Fold it back together, and then we are just going to cut an interesting snowflake. Some few random cuts like that. And then maybe a few holes in the sides like this. Going to do one like this. And then it's nice to try and predict what it's going to look like when it's opened up, and that's always a good thing to do with practical symmetry exercises. If we open up this one, it comes out looking like that, and we quickly have a lovely window display for Christmas. Next, we definitely want children to play around with mirrors and explore symmetry practically with mirrors. It's a great basis for an art lesson. Let them invent, create, and really pay attention to what it is that their mirror shows them. In the video on angle rules, I showed how we could use mirrors to prove the rule that opposite angles on crossed lines are equal. If you'd like to have a look at that one, here's a link to it now. But as we go on to look further at symmetry by folding shapes and by using tracing paper and by careful drawing techniques, which I'm going to show you, it's lovely if children have learnt to use mirrors to check their answers. And if those mirrors could still be available for them and they could be encouraged to use them to check the other methods they're using, that would be fantastic. So we also want to look at symmetry in two-dimensional shapes. It is a great idea if you take the time to let children cut these shapes out and fold them. It's just such a powerful and memorable learning experience. And if you could set them some work just on the regular polygons, the pentagon, the hexagon, the heptagon, the octagon, and then ask them to draw conclusions about how many lines of symmetry each has, can they describe the patterns of what's going on, that's very powerful work. Another shape that it's really important to look at in detail is the rectangle. How many lines of symmetry has this rectangle got? And most people can see the vertical line and the horizontal line, but are there diagonal lines? That's quite a tricky question. It's great to cut it out. It's great to use a mirror and really have a heated debate about it until everyone is convinced that if you reflect a rectangle on a diagonal, you end up with a kite rather than a rectangle. So the diagonal is not a line of symmetry. Right, the next practical tool it's great for children to get to grips with when they're working on symmetry is tracing paper. If they're starting with one little picture and they're going to reflect it in a line, they can draw over that picture and then fold the paper over. Maybe you'll need to cut it just past the line or cut it along the line and just flip it over the line of symmetry and then scribble on it, and that picture should appear. And you can create beautiful symmetry pictures that way. You can take it on to have more than one line of symmetry. And it's a really good idea to teach children to use tracing papers. Sometimes that skill is forgotten, and it's really helpful with other aspects of maths going forward when children are working on rotations and other mathematical transformations in the future. So get some work with tracing paper in if you can. And sometimes if you just want to see if a shape is symmetrical, if you just trace the shape and then fold the tracing paper, it's really easy to see if the picture fits exactly on itself and to know for sure if you've found a line of symmetry or not. So the next bit of work it's really important to do with children gets them to focus on symmetry in cases where the mirror line, or the line of symmetry as it's also called, is not vertical or horizontal. Vertical symmetry is really easy for children. They get it intuitively because their brain is wired up to see vertical symmetry. And horizontal symmetry we can get simply by turning our heads sideways or turning the page sideways. And it's still relatively easy to see, although it's not as intuitive as vertical symmetry. But what happens when the mirror line is not horizontal or vertical? Let's look at an example. How would you reflect a triangle like this in a mirror line or a line of symmetry like this? You could try turning it so that's vertical, but it's still quite difficult to see. The way to do it is to measure with a clear ruler, and you will need a clear ruler for this activity, the distance from the triangle to the mirror line perpendicular to the mirror line. Now, you can tell if it's perpendicular or not by whether the markings on the ruler run straight down the line of symmetry or not. These lines are perpendicular to the ruler edge, so if they're running down the mirror line, then the ruler is perpendicular to the mirror line, and it has to be. We can't measure like that, and we can't measure like that from that point. We have to measure perpendicular to the mirror line. So if I place this ruler on and rotate it until I can see the mirror line is going in the same direction as the markings on the ruler, That's 3 centimetres. So I can go 3 centimetres the other side and place a dot like that. And then I can do the same with the other points. Again, I have to make sure the ruler is perpendicular to the mirror line. Measure that distance, go the same distance the other side, and the same for this one. And if you then join them up, it should come out looking something like this. And if you turn it so the mirror line is vertical, it should look about right. It's quite difficult to do perfectly, but it's a good challenge. It focuses attention exactly where it belongs, and it really challenges children to use rulers carefully and correctly, especially in cases where they're not always measuring from 0, which is quite a challenge. So it's just an excellent activity to do. And if they can do it with triangles, then they can try it with harder pictures, and of course they can check those with mirrors or tracing paper. If you're setting up a worksheet like this, you might want to set it up with a skewed mirror line and carefully measure the corners of your triangle so they're exact numbers of centimetres when they're measured perpendicular to the mirror line. One last activity that's really worth doing on symmetry is going to consolidate your work on coordinates. So you can give children a challenge like this. You can ask them to reflect this shape in the y-axis, which they should be able to do because they can use the techniques you've just taught them, or they can just see it because it's a vertical line of symmetry and draw the shape in like this. And then you can ask them to focus on the pairs of corresponding points like these, look at their coordinates and describe what's happening to each pair of coordinates when you reflect a shape in the y-axis. And what's happening is that the second coordinate stays the same because you're the same distance up, but the first coordinate becomes the negative of what it previously was. And you can ask them, is that true if you start with a shape over here? What about if you start with a shape down here, if you're working in 4 coordinates? Can you write that in algebra? If the coordinates of a point over here are AB, then after reflection, the coordinates of the point over here would be negative A, B. That's writing it in algebra. So beyond the core curriculum, where else can we look at symmetry? Well, we can definitely look for it in the world around us in any subject, wherever we are. Even if we're just waiting in the hall for something to start, you can just say, can you see any objects that show symmetry? It can definitely be incorporated into PE, in balances where children are working in pairs and are creating symmetry between them, in dances, and you can have more than one line of symmetry in your dance. That's a fabulous challenge. And of course, children have loads of fun mirroring facial expressions. If you think that they just need a laugh and a cheer up, get them mirroring each other's facial expressions. When we come back to look at 3-dimensional shapes in the video on 3D shapes, we will be looking at planes of symmetry rather than lines of symmetry because we're working in 3 dimensions. But I'll look at that then. And of course, you also come across symmetry when you're studying odd and even numbers, and you can build that into your squidgy paintings if you make them of ladybirds with certain numbers of spots. So your takeaways from this video are that symmetry is a wonderful subject to teach and explore, and you want to get messy and you want to have fun, you want to do lots of art. You want to do squidgy paintings, lots of cutting, lots of working with mirrors and tracing papers, lots of detailed drawing with your rulers that are perpendicular to the line of symmetry, the mirror line. All of this is really important. And symmetry is a great topic to focus on if you're having a whole school day of maths or doing maths week. Just get everyone doing symmetry and showing off to each other what they've done. If you've got great tasks to share, please post them in the comments. If you know other people who might benefit from seeing this video, I'd be hugely grateful if you'd recommend it to them and possibly share it in social media groups. I hope to see you again soon for another video. The next video in this series will be on area, but there will very soon be videos on every single topic in primary maths. Most of them are already live. Take care. Bye for now.